Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down complex topics by going straight to the source material. Today, we're going to deconstruct a Fox News segment to see exactly how it built a very specific narrative around the anti-ICE protests happening in Minneapolis. So, the segment kicks off with this really provocative statement from a conservative commentator. Right out of the gate, they're setting a strong moral frame. Before you even see any footage or hear any facts, they've basically drawn a line in the sand. These are the good guys, and these are the bad guys.
Now, the entire segment is really anchored around this one single event, a protest that actually moved inside a church in St. Paul, Minnesota. This one incident becomes the foundation for the entire story they're about to tell.
And this is the chant the segment decides to highlight. By focusing on this, the broadcast frames the protest as not just, a political act, but as a direct challenge to a religious institution. It changes the whole feel of it. And here we go. This is where you see the counter-narrative really start to form. The host immediately makes this historical comparison to attacks on churches, even bringing up the civil rights era. It's a way of adding this incredible historical weight and gravity to what's happening.
The segment then lays out these very specific details. They talk about protesters storming the sanctuary, screaming at people, calling it a clandestine operation. These details are presented as the facts of the case, and they become the building blocks for the much bigger argument that's coming.
Okay, so we've covered the what of the event. Now the segment pivots to the who. And let me tell you, how they describe the protesters is absolutely key to shaping how you, the viewer, are supposed to feel about all this. Now host, Harris Faulkner, is not subtle about it at all. She literally says, let's call them criminals, shall we? This is such a crucial moment. The word protester is intentionally swapped out for criminal, and that completely changes the lens through which we're seeing their actions.
And this wasn't just a one-time thing. You hear this kind of language over and over again in the segment. Words like agitators, phrases like harassment of federal agents, assaulting agents, it's all designed to paint a very specific and very negative picture of the people involved. So once you've defined the problem and you've labeled the players, what's the next logical step? Well, you have to assign blame. And that's exactly what happens next, as the focus shifts from the streets of Minneapolis straight to the politicians.
I mean, look at this contrast. It's so stark. On one hand, you have the mayor of Minneapolis saying people are speaking up peacefully. On the other, you have the host's commentary we just heard calling them violent criminals. It really highlights the two completely different realities being presented. And then they bring in what they call a statement from ICE itself. And it directly points the finger at the Democratic governor and mayor, accusing them of whipping these mobs into a frenzy. Guest after guest, reporter after reporter, they just keep building this case. The argument is that this chaos isn't random. Nope. It's the direct result of policies and rhetoric from Democratic leaders, from the city level all the way up to the White House.
So, after laying out the problem and who's supposedly to blame, the segment offers up a solution. The whole situation is framed as a failure of local government that can only be solved by a big, strong federal response.
To really hammer home how serious this is, the host throws out this number, 1,500. That's not just some random detail. It's meant to sound huge, to communicate the sheer scale of the federal force that is apparently on standby.
So what does this federal response look like? Well, it's a whole playbook, a Department of Justice investigation, talk of using the Insurrection Act, and a guest framing it as the president needing to take control. The message is crystal clear. The feds are the only ones who can restore order.
And this quote from a guest just perfectly sums up the entire philosophy being pushed in the segment. It's so simple. The problem is chaos. The solution is law and order. That's it. That's how you solve it.
And finally, for the big finish, the segment zooms all the way out. The argument becomes that this isn't just a story about a protest in Minnesota. No, this is a story that has huge implications for every single person watching all across America. A guest who happens to be a Republican Senate candidate just comes right out and says it. What's happening in Minneapolis is no longer just a local issue. It's being framed as a warning call, a preview of what could happen in your city too.
And that's the final, powerful idea they leave you with. The narrative is complete. They've taken a single protest and turned it into a symbol of a massive, looming national crisis, and they've laid the blame squarely on one political ideology. To make sure that threat doesn't feel abstract, they use this really vivid, personal testimony. You get this image of a city that's boarded up, a city in chaos. It's designed to make the danger feel immediate
and very, very real to the viewer.
So we've basically just deconstructed how this one news segment built its narrative, step by step, from a protest in a church to labeling people as criminals, blaming politicians, and finally issuing this dire national warning. It really leaves us with a pretty important question to think about, doesn't it? How much of our understanding of an event is shaped by the event itself versus how much is shaped by the story someone decides to tell us about it?